Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first in a new shelter community education series, Healthy Families, Preventing Child Abuse One Family at a Time. My name is Maria Brauer, and I'm the Senior Director of Development for Shelter, Inc. I would like to go over a couple housekeeping items before we get started. First off, all of our attendees have been muted. If you need assistance or have a question, the chat feature has been disabled, so please use the Q&A button at the bottom and we will address your needs as soon as possible. If you need technical assistance, you can call or text our event helpline at 847-348-9240, and there is someone on the end of that line who will be able to help you. This webinar is being recorded and we will send you a link to the recording in the next couple of days. And then we'll also email you any handouts, the slides, and email the CEU certificates. And just as a reminder, this webinar is worth 1 continuing education credit. For any of our new friends today, since 1975, Shelter's mission has been to end the cycle of abuse by providing a comprehensive network of support to children, their families, and our community to create safe, healthy, and nurturing homes. We have 7 programs with a focus on our mission: foster care, 2 emergency group homes for youths ages 11 to 17, a transitional living program for 17 to 21-year-olds who were identified as male at birth, a youth experiencing homelessness program for those ages 18 to 24, our new clinical program providing free mental health therapy to children and their family members, our Hotline and community outreach and education program, and our Healthy Families program, which you will learn about more today. I'm so grateful that you're here today because 1 out of 5 youths in Illinois will be abused by the time they reach 18. The way to end this pandemic is for all of us to work together. So thank you for sharing in our vision that all children grow up in safe and loving homes. I'd like to introduce our first presenter today, Kristin Kaufman. Kristin is currently working for Prevent Child Abuse Illinois as the home visiting specialist and is also the program coordinator of the Impact of Childhood Trauma program. Kristin holds a Master of Science in Human Services from Capella University and a Bachelor of Science in Business Management from Illinois College. Kristin spent 9 years working in child welfare, with her last 3 years working as a program supervisor. Kristin has experience working directly with clients, as well as leading a team of case managers under her program. She has a passion for the work that she does in relation to child abuse prevention, specifically in regard to childhood trauma. In 2017, Kristin became a certified trauma-informed response trainer through the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Kristin is also an advocate of ACEs and became a certified adverse childhood experiences trainer through ACE Interface in 2018. Kristin is also certified in restorative statewide initiatives, including multiple child abuse prevention coalitions, the Illinois Childhood Trauma Coalition, and the Illinois ACEs Responsive Collaborative. Kristin is an advocate for change, which she facilitates through collaborations, trainings, community conversations, and strategic planning on a local, regional, and state level. Welcome, Kristin.
Thank you, Maria. I am not going to add too much to that bio, so I'm just going to share my screen and get started just to make sure that we have enough time for our other presenter and questions and answers at the end. So we'll just jump right in. Not sure why it's not letting me. Let me try this again. There we go. Okay. So the slide that I'm going to share with you guys today really came out of PCA's response to our worlds being turned upside down last March. We knew, by April, May, this was going to change the way that we look at child abuse and neglect prevention, knowing that most of our mandated reporters were no longer going to be in physical contact with these kids that need us the most. So we worked really hard to develop this training to just look at how prevention efforts change due to most of our world being virtual. And I know now, schools are going back either hybrid or in person. Some schools have been in person. Service providers are starting to move from a virtual world back to in person. But I still think the information is important because I'm not sure how long it will take us to really get back 100% to where we were pre-pandemic. Just a little bit about PCA. I'm not going to read all through this, but we are our own freestanding 501c3. We are a chapter of Prevent Child Abuse America, so every state has their own chapter. We were established in 1990, and we really do most of our work in prevention, education, and public awareness, community outreach, public policy advocacy, and promotion of effective prevention programs. Last year, we celebrated our 30th anniversary, so now we're into our 31st year. But if you ever want more information or more trainings brought to your organization, please feel free to check out our website. It has all of our different training programs that we do and a literature distribution program. So some of the programs that we offer, again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are the programs that we offer trainings in. So again, if you're interested, please check out our website. You guys being in the Southern region, your Southern region prevention specialist is Amber Anderson. She's actually on maternity leave. So Brittany Hale, who is on this flyer, is your guys' prevention specialist if you guys do want trainings in the future. So just to start off, just wanted to share a little bit of data on the impact of COVID on children and families. Not going to read through all these. I believe you'll get these slides at the end of the presentation. It's also cited at the bottom. So if you want more, please feel free to check those out. But what I think is most important, and again, this data is at the end of last year, 1 in 4 adults in households with children were behind on rent. That's huge. Over 7 million adults in households with children reported that children in the household often or sometimes did not have enough to eat. Again, those are huge, huge numbers. 42% of households with young children anticipated having difficulty paying for basic needs. And 2/3 of households with young children living at or below 150% of the poverty line, which is about $36,000 for a family of 4, so 2 adults and 2 children, are having difficulty paying for basic needs. I do believe the current administration with the American Rescue Plan has been addressing that. I just saw a stat the other day where the food insecurity rate for children has gone down by almost double. So I do think that this current administration's focus on, addressing some of these basic need issues, food, shelter, has been a help to where maybe some of these numbers might not be as high right now. This was again through the CARES Act. We've just now passed the American Rescue Plan, and those funds are starting to kind of trickle out to states. So I think after we have some time with those funds, these numbers might not be quite as disparaging as they seem right now. And then we know, or we knew back in April that the child poverty rate could spike as much as 53% due to the COVID outbreak. Again, the current administration's plan, one of the key aspects of that plan was to cut child poverty rates by 50% for the next 2 years. So they weren't the administration in April of 2020, but when they took office, that was a huge thing that they wanted to address. So we now know that the child poverty rate did not actually spike by 53%. And in fact, it's going to decrease by almost 50% over the next 2 years due to that American Rescue Plan. So how has the pandemic increased the risk for child abuse and neglect? There are several different studies, several experts that have weighed in on this. But some of the biggest increases for risk come from health concerns. So whether the caretaker has health concerns or the child has health concerns, just the, job security, unemployment rates are pretty high. It has put a strain on parent-child relationships because everybody's been in the home. If you have little ones or homeschool age children, that can be a lot. Obviously, it comes with some financial stressors, being at home all day with the kids, and then just the regular uncertainty and anxiety during these times can all increase the risk of child abuse and neglect. Some signs of stress due to the pandemic. So we have the physical or psychological distress, such as your somatic symptoms like headaches, stomach aches, poor concentration, intrusive thoughts or difficulty sleeping, avoidance reactions such as withdrawing, shutting down, or avoiding talking about what's happening. That has probably been one of the biggest ones, just due to the sheer amount of isolation that we're all feeling. Increased emotions like anxiety, irritability, anger, or fear. A lot of changes in behavior, including increase in self-destructive or risk-taking behaviors, drop in school engagement, even social service engagement and achievement, and a lot of depression. I think as we, I always hate to say like, oh, we're on like the tail end of this because of the vaccine. I don't necessarily think we're like quite there yet, but I'm sure this is not shocking to this group, but the amount of mental health impacts this is going to have outside of just returning to our normal routines is going to be huge. And I believe at the state and federal level, we have administrations that are prioritizing that and understanding that that's going to be something we are going to have to fund for services, whether it's long-term or short-term funds, because that's going to be huge. Just readapting is going to be change enough, but then to address the last year and a half or 2 years, however long it takes, to get people back in a mental place where they were before is going to be so important. So how has COVID-19 impacted child abuse and neglect report? So the early data that was coming out those first 4 to 6 months, we know that reports of child maltreatment in a period of 2020 were 40 to 60% lower than in the same period in 2019. So those started dropping in March due to the executive orders. There was reports in the Chicago Tribune that preliminary DCFS data showed the number of hotline calls plummeted from an average of more than 6,000 calls per week to only 3,400 in the week ending March 22nd, which is the week after the shelter-in-place order happened, and then just down to 2,600 calls during the last week of March. And we know that was because mandated reports from schools and social services accounted for more than, like almost 60% of the hotline's volume. And once that shelter-in-place order took effect, those mandated reporters were no longer seeing these kids. Just a little chart to just kind of show you like graphically what those calls look like. So you can see at the beginning of March, prior to the shelter-in-place order, we were again reaching up to 7,000. And then in 1 week, again, that significant drop. That didn't necessarily mean that, the abuse and neglect was not happening. It just wasn't being reported, which was really concerning. And DCFS and their partners did a lot of work really quickly to kind of address that and, come up with creative out of the box ways to make sure that mandated reporters were still understanding what they could be looking for and how to report those concerns, and then reaching out to a whole new group of mandated reporters, especially law enforcement, to make sure they were now going to be the highest group of mandated reporters that have access to children, because obviously they were still working. So they did a lot of work with LEOs to make sure that they had the resources that they needed. So where we are today, we know that towards the end of the summer in 2020, calls began to pick back up in volume. and hotline calls in September of 2020 were only down by 18% from the last year, which still not great that they were down, but going from a 60% drop to only a 20% drop, that was good news in terms of reporting. In October of 2020, DCFS launched an updated version of the online reporting system, which included a more streamlined process and made it easier to submit a report online, and you could actually even do it through your mobile phone with this updated version. So that has been huge in terms of again, adapting to this virtual world. They had already launched an online reporting system, prior to the pandemic. It wasn't very user-friendly. And at that time, I believe only mandated reporters could use it. So when they launched this updated version, it really made the process more streamlined. The other thing to note, which I thought was really interesting, was there was an increase of number of investigations in late 2020 than during the same time in 2019. So even though our call volume was less, kids were being seen by these investigators. So they were actually handling more investigations than they were in 2019. And again, why the drop in calls doesn't mean a drop in abuse or neglect. Just the sheer amount of isolation was a huge issue, where these kids used to be able to go to school, or they would be in sports or other activities. They would go to before school care, after school care, just so many different places. And now they were being isolated with their abusers. And we know abuse typically happens in isolation. And because they weren't being seen in person, again, just meant they were kind of suffering, in silence, which was a huge motivating factor to make sure that we are still, we have to adapt to this. We can't just be like, well, we're not seeing them in person. So that was a huge push out of DCFS and some of their partners. So what does preventing child abuse and neglect look like in a virtual world? People, when this first happened, they were like, oh my gosh, like, what am I gonna have to be looking for? Like, it's all going to be different now. And, it really isn't, because a lot of the signs that we would typically look for still apply, even in a virtual world. And if you aren't seeing kids in person, there are other signs you can look for, through that Facebook Live, or through that Zoom call, or through that, Google Classroom, wherever you are seeing those kids. So some of those signs that you can look out for in a virtual world: if the parent's always with the child or in the background, if the parent doesn't allow the child to speak with you, you start seeing a sudden decrease in engagement, or even just not even engagement necessarily, but even just like demeanor, right? You might have a kiddo who every week used to love when you called them and was so excited and had things to show you and things to talk about. And then all of a sudden, so right, not gradually over time, but like all of a sudden, they are very quiet, withdrawn. Those sudden decreases in engagement or demeanor can be huge indicators. If you see some unexplained injuries, start seeing some lack of hygiene issues, you can always pay attention to what's happening in the background of the home. I think about back to my child welfare days, where, we would go to trainings on home visit safety, right? Always make sure that you are facing an exit. Don't ever corner yourself into a room. How to assess for like things in the household. It's going to be the same when you are on a virtual call. I do a lot of work with CASAs, and, one of the things that they were concerned the most with was like not being able to kind of see, right, the rest of the house. If the kid was just on the tablet or on the phone sitting on the couch, you can always encourage them, like, hey, it's been so long since I've been to your room. Like, do you have anything new in your room that you want to show me? And that way the kid is encouraged to, right, get up, kind of walk through the house, and you can kind of pick up on some of those things that might be happening in the background. And then knowing the signs of someone who is under the influence of alcohol or illegal drugs. Again, these are things we were looking for before. It's just, how do you notice that in a virtual world, right? Before, if you had a caregiver who was under the influence, their speech might be a little like mumbled, and you would know that because you were in their home. Well, in a virtual world, they might not ever talk to you if you're talking with just the child. So making sure you know other signs that maybe weren't our go-to signs, when we were in person. In a virtual world, those signs can be much more prevalent. Talking with children virtually. I know people are probably pros at this now, right? Like we again developed this like early on into this pandemic, but I still think it's important, maybe something might spark or you might get a little new nugget of information. But we have to kind of move past like, oh, it's so different, and really kind of go back to like our basic engagement strategies that worked well in person. They will work well in a virtual world by just being curious and asking questions of children and caregivers about how they're doing, what's going well, what concerns they have. Some of those examples, what was the best part of your day? What was the hardest part of the day? Can you tell me what you had for breakfast? What's your favorite part about being at home? Bringing up things that that they like to do pre-pandemic that they aren't able to do now, and asking them, have they been able to, talk to their teammates or to their groups or their clubs that they were involved with before? Asking if they've been able to see their friends, whether virtually or maybe, having an outside play date where they can, stay socially distanced. And then talking with caregivers, if the child's like, oh, I really miss, Bobby, I haven't seen him in so long. I just miss, playing with him. Giving some resources to parents, the weather's nice now. Is there a time you could run over there and they could just, play catch in the yard, right? So they're still socially distanced. They don't have to, be in each other's faces or inside. But giving those resources to keep those kids connected to their pre-pandemic worlds is important too. The other thing I just want to caveat, we have to make sure, I know this is like a new, well, maybe not new as much anymore, but we're still adapting. We still have to use that common sense that, if the parent is always standing next to the child, making sure we're not asking questions of the child that could put them at risk for having to either lie or, not answer the question. So the same thing, in child welfare, we had to talk with the kids outside of the biological parent or the foster parent to make sure, that they could tell us if they were feeling unsafe or, they could feel like they could be honest. So the same thing is in the virtual world. Please don't put the kids in a position if the caregiver's right there, if you're concerned about something that you're asking them. Some organizational responsibility. So again, I think organizations over the last 6-9 months have done an amazing job at kind of looking at policies and procedures and adding in some flexibility and defining some guidelines of this new virtual procedure. But I feel like we can't talk about changing the way that we are providing services if we don't look at the organizational level. So making sure that we're still, learning about cultural bias. This can look different in a virtual world. We're strengthening cultural gaps, planning and sharing virtual activities. I know in the HFI cluster groups throughout the state that I'm a part of, a lot of our time is spent in some of those meetings talking about how are you engaging your families. Some people do have a private Facebook group where they, connect once a week and have a parent support group. Other people do drive-through events, things like that. So being able to share those, what's worked for one program can definitely work for other programs is really important. And then making sure that our policies include provisions for this new virtual world. So building in safeguards, making sure, just as much as we try to get away from one-on-one situations with children, same thing with contact, emailing, making sure that we're CCing other people, just to have somebody else have that paper trail. Recording sessions, if that's possible. I know there's some issues with HIPAA on that, but again, just making sure that we are maintaining that integrity of our services because a lot of our policies didn't fit the virtual world. And again, I know funders and programs are doing an amazing job really looking at those policies and trying to incorporate some of that flexibility. The last thing I want to talk about real quick is just building resilience in a virtual world, because again, that is that is what everybody's trying to do. That's what our program services are revolved around. So just making sure that we're talking openly and honestly with children and families about COVID-19, especially now. I feel like I have a lot of conversations about vaccine hesitancy and the, like that really hard line of like informing your families about it versus like encouraging them to get it. It is really tricky. So just being open and honest about, being able to answer their questions, providing them resources if there is some hesitancy. Again, the more honest we can be, the better it will be for them. Setting up virtual chats or support groups, connecting as frequently as possible, making sure families have all the ways that they can contact you and giving them that information regularly. That is true in a virtual world or in a in-person world. We cannot give our families, our contact information enough. We can think like, oh, I gave them my card, or yeah, they know how to contact me. They've texted me before, they've called me before. That's great. But the more often we give it to them, the more likely they are to reach out in a really crisis time. Making sure we're giving the family time to talk about how they're feeling, continuing to connect them with resources, helping them establish a new normal routine. Again, I'm sure most of your families like have that down now since we're like a year and a half into this, or just a little over a year. And then creating virtual rituals has been a fun way to kind of keep that integrity of sessions or home visits that you guys have been doing, but really making sure that some of those rituals happen either the first 5 minutes, allowing for small breaks, and taking time to celebrate successes. I just wanted to throw in here about the online reporting system. This system is only to be used for non-life-threatening and non-emergency incidents of child abuse and neglect. So if, you see cuts, bruises, welts, things like that, or the child discloses something to you, please call the hotline. Do not report it online. That's for online is for non-emergencies, to help kind of filter the volume of calls that the hotline report's actually getting. And here are some stats on that new reporting system. What I think is so amazing is the return calls. I know when I left child welfare, I would go 2 or 3 days before I got a call back from a hotline when I would report something as a mandated reporter. That was really frustrating as a mandated reporter, as a worker, case manager, as a supervisor, when my staff would have to wait for so long. So after that first week of that updated online system, there were only 26 callbacks compared to over 2,200 in September of 2019. So obviously the online reporting system is doing its job, right? It's helping filter some of those like call volumes. So I think that is so amazing and probably such a great relief to some of those hotline staff. Most importantly, if you see something, say something, call the hotline, call 911. We can't just, be a little more timid just because we're not seeing them in person and we don't really know for sure. The hotline is for suspected child abuse and neglect, not verified child abuse and neglect. So again, just, always make sure, err on the side of caution. That's how I used to talk to my team about it. If you feel the need to call because you're suspecting something, just make the call. If it's non-life threatening, you can use the online reporting system. And if one of those hotline workers feel it needs a response, there'll be a response. So that's all I have. I do see that there was a question and put in the chat box. I don't know, Maria, if you want to wait till the end.
I can address, I actually have a couple questions, or one that kind of came in a different manner, but the question that popped up says, can you give us an example of an online report?
So an example of an online report, maybe you saw something in the background, the parent's behavior might have been, you might have thought they were under the influence. That would be an online report. versus you're seeing a kid and you see a cut, welt, or bruise on their face. I would call that in. Like, that to me is more of a safety issue than a risk. So that, if that's a better way to kind of phrase that, if you think it's a safety issue, that's a phone call. If you feel like that child is unsafe right now, that's a phone call. If it's a risk issue where you think, ooh, that could put them at risk, that's an online report.
Great, thank you. I do have another question. Kristin, have you noticed in the data a change in the types of abuse or the severity of the abuse during COVID?
I don't have any specific data, just from my workings with our DCFS partners and some programs. I would say still the highest call volume is on neglect issues, not necessarily abuse, but where they did see a spike was severity of domestic violence incidents. So not necessarily the kids being physically abused, but the severity of domestic violence incidents, where I think in some counties, felony cases for domestic violence, which is more severe forms of abuse, were up by like close to 60-70%. So they're still seeing as kids as the victims is still the highest call volume is neglect. Where they have seen the spike in abuse is that domestic violence.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on. If other questions come up that you think of during this section, on Kristin's presentation, or if something comes, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So thank you so much, Kristin. That was really a great and very informative presentation.
Thank you.
I wanted to introduce our next speaker. Our second presenter today is Ileana Carpena. Ileana graduated with her bachelor's in social work at Aurora University and will be continuing her education this fall by attending Dominican University to pursue a master's in social work and a master's in mediation and conflict resolution. Ileana has been working with Shelter Inc. in our Healthy Families program for 2 years as a bilingual family support worker. And Ileana has had the opportunity to work with many families from different backgrounds and looks forward to continuing to learn and grow in the field of social work. So welcome, Ileana.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here. Let me just go ahead and share my screen really quick. Let's see. There we go. All right, awesome. So I work with Shelter Inc. under the Healthy Families program, which is a child abuse prevention program. I'm super excited to kind of share a little bit about Healthy Families and kind of explain how we really use our strategies in the program to kind of help end this pattern of abuse and neglect. I think to begin with, it is important for us to kind of define what child neglect is. And it's a form of child abuse that can be defined as not meeting a child's needs in any of the 4 areas: physical, medical, emotional, or educational. Most new moms and dads want what's best for their new babies. But for some, there are 2 big obstacles in successful parenting. One of those is not knowing what any of those needs are, whether it's physical, medical, emotional, or educational. And also they kind of lack the skills that they need in order to meet those needs for their child. For new parents with multiple pre-existing challenges, those obstacles can be really overwhelming, as the story of the family that I'll be sharing with you in a moment and kind of refer back to throughout the presentation. So Healthy Families targets first-time mothers, either prenatally or when their infants are up to 3 months of age, usually when parents are most eager to learn about their new babies. Sometimes parents come to our Healthy Families programs through family or friends. or through family or friend referrals, or sometimes through community agencies. Other times, our Healthy Family staff will reach out to first-time parents through our partnering hospitals in the area. Eligible factors to come into our program can be being a single parent, can be poverty, whether that's having a low-income job or being unemployed. Also, some mental health concerns. Specifically, we like to look for any sort of depression or anxiety, as those can be high indicators for postpartum depression. Also, if there's any history or current substance abuse, whether that's with alcohol or any other sort of drugs. Teen parents as young as 14, 15, 16 years of age. If the parent is lacking any support within their family or friends. Of course, any sort of childhood history of abuse or lack of a high school education. Families who sign up for a program know that it is completely free, voluntary, and confidential. And families who sign up for a program can stay in the Healthy Families program up until from prenatal to when the child then turns 5. To kind of illustrate our Healthy Family strategies in action, I want to share with you a family that I've been working with for about 2 years now. As a family support worker, I first met Mia in August of 2019 when she was in her second trimester. She was referred through Healthy Families by a friend who was also already in the program. Both Mia and her partner at the time, Tommy, both came from very religious families. They had met at church when Mia was 11 and Tommy was 12, and they've been together ever since. And both Mia and Tommy's families expected that they would one day get married. However, the pregnancy was unexpected and it was unplanned. And when Mia came into the program, she did face multiple challenges. One of the first ones being is that she was a teen parent. She was 17 when she first got pregnant. Mia's parents are caring, but they can be a little judgmental, and were pressuring both Mia and Tommy to get married, especially now that Mia was pregnant. They both did not have any experience with babies, and they really didn't have any knowledge about parenting. Mia is undocumented, and she had no medical knowledge or experience with any sort of social service resources. And though Mia and Tommy's relationship is really strong, Tommy is living in a different state, and they really only see each other on the weekends when Tommy isn't working. And Mia lacked the self-confidence to make her own decisions and to achieve her goals. So when I first started working with Mia, like I said, I started when she was in her second trimester. So I met with her first every 2 weeks. And then from there, I started meeting her weekly in her third trimester. My appointments for Mia, I occasionally also did interact with her parents. Tommy would also be present at some of our sessions, but I did get a chance to meet Mia's parents. Specifically, I recall one time when her dad asked me what my opinion was in Mia and Tommy getting married, and if I thought that they should, especially with the baby on the way. And that kind of put me in a tough spot, but I did want to reiterate that my role as a family support worker and in helping Mia was to provide her the guidance and the knowledge, support, and information that she needed to make any sort of decisions for herself. And I was kind of grateful for that moment because it kind of showed Mia that she could trust me, and kind of really reiterated what my role was. And it was helpful in really building our relationship. And then before her due date, Mia and I went over things such as prenatal care, preparing for the birth, making sure the environment for the baby was right. We talked about basic things such as information on breastfeeding and safe sleep to help prevent SIDS, which is sudden infant death syndrome. And in January 2020, Victoria, their baby girl, was born. And I was really excited to kind of continue supporting and guiding her now that the baby was actually born. And although every family is unique and they have different needs, there are 3 primary goals of the Healthy Families Program. The first goal is to help cultivate and straighten the nurturing parent-child relationship. The way that we do this is by using our Partners for a Healthy Baby evidence-based curriculum, which provides a lot of information, flyer, and facts that we share with the parents. We make the parent-child relationship the primary focus. We want to make sure that we kind of take a step back and observe any sort of parent-child interaction and really make it the focus. We encourage the parents to read and respond to any infant cues. For example, when a child is rubbing their eyes, that usually indicates they're sleepy. So we like to kind of show parents like, oh, look, he's rubbing his eyes, maybe he's sleepy, you know, kind of letting them pick up on those infant cues. We provide any support to reduce any parental stress. We teach realistic developmental expectations, and we promote especially positive discipline methods. We also try to achieve this first goal by providing parent-child activities, supporting the child development age appropriate. We'd like to bring in, child appropriate activities such as building blocks, coloring, painting, bringing books for the parent to read. I know that right now with COVID, we're doing a lot of our sessions via Zoom. So we kind of have to get creative with the activities that we bring in. Sometimes I like to just tell parents, grab a Tupperware and grab safe little items and drop them in the Tupperware and let the baby pick it out. Pick out the toy, pick out the items that they get and kind of see how they react. So we kind of had to get a little creative with our activities. Mia did react positively to all these objectives to achieve that first goal. She and Tommy both learned to bond with Victoria, and they really shifted their relationship with their parents and that mentality and started shifting their mindset to how they can really have a strong relationship with Victoria and with themselves. The second goal is for us is to promote a healthy childhood growth and development. We do this by supporting parents in obtaining a medical home, making sure that they get the baby's immunizations, and making sure that they're keeping up with any well-child visits. We like to bring in any information about vaccinations and kind of the benefits as to why to get them if there are some parents that are hesitant. Or if we need to get them connected to their local clinic for any well-child visits. We also support parents in providing healthy nutrition. We can either bring in any sort of resources or information, videos surrounding breastfeeding, or for example, when they can start feeding the child solids. We conduct developmental screenings using our ages and stages questionnaire that kind of helps track the baby's development. And if there are any concerns regarding those developmental screenings, we do like to make referrals to early intervention services if needed. We also complete any home safety checklists to ensure that the baby's home is hazardous free. And again, we like to screen mothers for depression, especially in the baby's first year of life, as we like to kind of see if there are any mental health concerns, any risk of postpartum depression. And from there, we kind of provide the mom with any resources in the area if they need some mental health counseling. With Mia and Victoria now has a medical home, and Mia is really on top of her immunizations and her well-child visits. The only challenge we kind of encountered with Mia and Victoria was that Victoria kind of had a small hip dysplasia and she needed a brace. And unfortunately, the brace was taking a little long to arrive. So we didn't want Victoria's hip hip dysplasia to worsen. So, but Mia was a little hesitant about bothering the doctors. Oops, my apologies. There we go. She was a little hesitant to keep bothering the doctors about her hip, the brace. So I kind of had to remind Mia, and we kind of had a discussion that she is Victoria's biggest advocate, especially when it comes to her health and how she really needs to kind of fight for her daughter and fight for her health. And so thankfully, Mia was successful in getting her brace, which also increased Mia's confidence and really speaking up for herself and for her family. The third goal that we try to achieve is enhancing the family functioning by building protective factors. It's really important for us to partner with the families in setting goals. We like to have the parent or the mom really take charge in setting goals for themselves and creating their goal plan. And we're kind of just there to guide them and to support them in achieving those goals. We also like to link the family to community resources for basic needs, whether that's getting them connected to their local WIC office, getting them, like I said, connected to any early intervention services in the area. If there are any sort of concerns in the developmental screening. We also support the parents in developing a reliable support system, whether that's with their immediate family, with their friends, with people at school or at their jobs. We discuss lifestyle choices that do support a healthy development for their child and for themselves. And we also increase parental confidence and competence. Setting goals and learning how to accomplish them was something particularly important to Mia, as she knew that she eventually did want to get married to Tommy, but she kind of had her own goals in mind first, such as continuing her education and becoming a nurse. And like I mentioned before, she was a little bit timid before in speaking up for herself and really letting her voice be heard. So it was really important for me to help increase her confidence and let her know that her voice is just as important as anybody else's. So how's the family doing now? Like I mentioned, Victoria was born in January of 2020. So they've been raising Victoria in the middle of a pandemic. However, they are very strong built family, and they are very on top and really engaged with the program. Even right now during our Zoom sessions, when Tommy is visiting their child, because like I said, he lives in a different state, he tries to be as involved in the visits. I constantly see Victoria during our Zoom sessions, and they really have built this strong family. And Mia turned 19 in October of 2020, and then her and Tommy officially got married in November. And the family has set goals and is currently working to achieve them. Mia started at Harper College, and even though we kind of had to put her educational goals aside for a moment, because like I mentioned, she is undocumented, and thankfully in January of this year, the DACA applications became available again. So we were able to get her connected with a lawyer to kind of help explain the DACA process and get her applied. And so she did submit her application. So we're kind of waiting back to hear if she got approved or not, although she does qualify for it. So I do believe she will get approved for DACA. She would then be able to start her nursing program, hopefully in the fall of this year, if not spring the next year. And Tommy right now is also in school studying computer science. Their long-term goal is to both graduate from college and then officially move in together and really raise Victoria and their household together. And the family is promoting healthy childhood growth and development. Like I said, they're really engaged in the visits. We complete developmental screenings with Victoria constantly. They always ask the right questions. And the parents had demonstrated an increased parental confidence and competence. Right now, their primary focus is, again, themselves and making sure that they are building a strong foundation for their family and building a strong foundation for their daughter. And the parents are connected to community resources that have had a significant impact. Like I said, one of the first steps in kind of getting her connected with DACA was referring her to Catholic Charities for some free legal help, getting her connected to any baby closets in the area if they were struggling to meet ends meet, getting her connected with WIC. So their progress has been really well. And they are definitely thankful for the Healthy Families Program and for all the help that we have been able to provide for them. So Wyatt Shelters Healthy Families Program, we have been providing home visiting services for 25 years. We were one of the first Healthy Families programs in the state and the model of other Illinois programs. We are the only Healthy Families program in the Northwest suburban Cook County, serving first-time mothers of all ages. So we go anywhere from like Hanover Park to Des Plaines to Glenview, Palatine, Mount Prospect. And like I mentioned, we target first-time mothers prenatally or up to 3 months of the infant's age when they're most eager to learn about their babies, and mothers and families can stay in our program up until the child turns 5 or, when the child is ready to go to kindergarten. In 25 years that we have been serving, only one child has been removed from the home due to any abuse or neglect. So that's a good little stat. And I want to thank you all for kind of like listening about my family and for taking the time to be here. But if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I don't know if there are any questions, Maria.
Actually, I do have one. Can you talk a little bit? Thank you so much, Ileana. That was really informative and wonderful. And it's great to kind of see how you've kind of built a relationship with this family. And can you talk a little bit about how it's different, how you may help a family who's undocumented in getting services, and how that's different than a family who is not undocumented?
Yeah, so with undocumented families, unfortunately there are a lot of limitations as far as applying for schools, applying for jobs. But what we try our best to do is really kind of get them connected to legal services in the area that can kind of help explain their rights as an undocumented individual, and really kind of inform them about any sort of legal help in the area. Like I said, it is a little bit more difficult as they can be limited in some areas, but we like to kind of give them as much information as we can and get them connected to their community resources that can kind of explain their rights and kind of get them kind of explain to them how they can get their citizenship process going. I know I have 2 other clients who are close, if not almost there, to becoming citizens. So yeah, it is a little bit different, a little bit more difficult, but it's just really kind of getting them connected to their resources in the area.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't have any other questions in our tab. And so I am going to leave this here. Both Ileana and Kristin, I know you gave your emails at the end, and so if there's any additional questions afterwards, I hope that's okay that they reach out. I also want to share our 24-hour hotline number, which is 847-255-8060. So if you do have a client or know a member of the community who could benefit from our Healthy Family Services or from any of the other services that we provide, this hotline is available, like I said, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we will be able to help navigate through the process. And if we don't have the resources, we will help you find another agency in the area who will have those resources. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, especially to Kristin and Ileana for sharing your presentations. They were just engaging and such a wealth of knowledge that's so important right now for our families, especially as we kind of come out of the pandemic. As I mentioned earlier, we will send everyone a link to this recording and a certificate for your CEU credits, along with slides and any handouts that the presenters provided. We'll also be sending announcements when our next community education series webinar is scheduled. And so we look forward to seeing you again and to our continued collaboration. In the interim, please reach out again to us at any time. And thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.